Welcome, everyone. Today we're diving deep into a year that truly shook the Qin Dynasty to its core, 209 BC, a year that saw the rise of a new emperor, Huhai, after the death of the legendary Qin Shi Huang.
A new emperor indeed. It's a fascinating period full of twists and turns that ultimately shape the destiny of the entire dynasty.
And we've got some amazing sources to guide us on this journey.
Oh, absolutely. We have the classic historical records like the Zizi Qingan and Shaky.
But we're also going to be looking at some really cool archaeological finds. Was that recently unearthed wooden tablet with Huhai's enthronement edict on it.
It's like a message directly from the past, a real window into the events of that time.
So are you ready to take a trip back in time with us?
Absolutely. Let's dive in.
All right, let's set the scene. We're in 209 BC, the Qin Dynasty is at a crossroads, and a new emperor, Huhai, ascends the throne. What happens first?
Well, imagine you're a new emperor, stepping into some pretty big shoes. What's one of the first things you might do?
Win over the people. Show them you're not like your father.
Exactly, and that's precisely what Huhai did. He declared a general amnesty.
A general amnesty. What does that mean exactly?
Basically a pardon for a whole bunch of offenses. It was a way for a new ruler to signal a fresh start, maybe even try to smooth over any potential for, dissent.
A clever tactic. So when exactly did this amnesty take place?
According to the Zizi Qingan, it was declared on the 4th day of the 10th month, 209 BC. Those meticulous record keepers.
They really knew the importance of details, didn't they? But here's something that strikes me as interesting. You know how emperors often had those reign titles?
Yes, those symbolic names that they would adopt upon taking the throne.
Right, exactly. So did Huhai have a reign title?
Actually, no. Reign titles became more common later. They were sort of a way for emperors to signal their intentions, or even warn their rivals. Huhai didn't have that tool at his disposal.
So he had to rely on other means to establish his legitimacy. And that brings us to that incredible discovery, his enthronement edict on that wooden tablet. It's like finding a lost letter from a king, right?
Absolutely. It was found in well number 9 at a place called Zishan in Yiyan, Hunan.
Imagine the excitement of the archaeologists when they unearthed that.
I can only imagine. And the edict itself is so insightful. It starts with the 4 characters, Sanfengyi Sao, which essentially means, I uphold the bequeathed edict.
He's basically saying, hey, I'm the rightful heir. I'm following in my father's footsteps.
Exactly. It was a crucial move to establish his legitimacy, especially considering the circumstances surrounding his, shall we say, rise to power.
It's always fascinating to see how new leaders try to position themselves, isn't it? So what kind of promises did Huhai make in this edict?
Well, he talks about legal reform, giving the people a fresh start, and ruling with a bit of a gentler hand.
Sounds promising, but, actions often speak louder than words. Did he actually live up to these grand pronouncements?
That's the million-dollar question. And to be honest, the reality would turn out to be quite different. As we delve deeper into this pivotal year, we'll see just how much his actions diverged from his initial promises.
Oh, this is getting juicy. I'm hooked already. So what happened next in this unfolding saga?
Well, after making those promises in his edict, Huhai decided to go on a grand tour. Retracing his father's steps, in fact.
Oh, interesting. And why would he do that? Just a sightseeing trip?
Not quite. These tours were carefully crafted events. Think of them as displays of imperial power and a way to strengthen national identity.
So a bit of a PR campaign, you might say.
You got it. Huhai even added to his father's inscriptions on some of the stela along the way.
Trying to connect himself to the legacy of the first emperor. Smart move.
It was a way to legitimize his rule, everyone that he was following in the footsteps of the great Qin Shi Huang.
I can almost picture him traveling across the empire, meeting his mark on those ancient stones. But what was going through his mind during this grand tour? Was he just following the script? Or was there something more at play?
That's an excellent question. To get a better understanding of that, we need to fast forward a bit to a crucial conversation that happened right after Huhai returned from his tour, a conversation that would set in motion a chain of events with some pretty devastating consequences.
Ooh, this sounds ominous. Who is this fateful conversation with?
With none other than Zhao Gao, a figure who would play a pivotal role in shaping the destiny of the Qin Dynasty, for better or for worse.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat. What was said in this conversation and why was it so important?
Well, picture this. Huhai, fresh off his tour, is feeling pretty good. He's emperor, he's in charge. And according to the historical accounts, he basically tells Zhao Gao that he's ready to enjoy the perks of the job, a life of pleasure and ease.
Well, who can blame him? Being emperor isn't exactly a walk in the park.
True enough. But Zhao Gao, ever the pragmatist, sees things differently. He's worried. He sees the throne as anything but secure and reminds Huhai of the potential threats lurking in the shadows.
Uh-oh. This sounds like trouble brewing. What kind of threats was Zhao Gao worried about?
He was mainly concerned about 2 groups. First, the princes, Huhai's brothers.
Those pesky siblings. Always causing trouble, right?
Well, in this case, it was a legitimate concern. Some of those princes might have had their own claim to the throne. And then there were the ministers, appointed by the previous emperor. Their loyalty to Huhai was, shall we say, questionable.
So Zhao Gao is basically saying, hold off on the partying, Your Majesty. We've got some serious business to attend to first.
Exactly. He understood the precariousness of the situation. You know, that feeling of a young ruler facing a nation that's not quite sure what to make of him yet? The Chinese have a term for this, Xiao Gao Yi.
Xiao Gao Yi, a young ruler facing a suspicious nation. It's a situation ripe for conflict, isn't it? But how did Huhai react to this warning? That, my friend, is where things get really interesting. And that's where we'll pick up next time. So last time we left off with Zhao Gao warning Huhai about the potential threats to his rule, those ambitious princes and those not-so-loyal ministers. What was Huhai's reaction to all this? Did he listen to Zhao Gao?
Well, imagine you're a young emperor, right? You've just come back from this grand tour, you're feeling powerful, maybe even invincible. Suddenly, you're being told that your position is in jeopardy.
I can see how that might not go over so well. Bit of a reality check, maybe.
Exactly. And it seems, at least according to the historical accounts, that Huhai wasn't too keen on hearing all this doom and gloom. He might have even seen Zhao Gao's warnings as, an attempt to manipulate him or just plain paranoia.
It's like that classic saying, heavy is the head that wears the crown. It seems Huhai wasn't quite ready for the weight of those responsibilities.
Right. And, there's this interesting perspective from a scholar named Wang Fuji. In his work, Duchen Yanlun, he talks about a key concept in Confucian thought. It's called Ziren Shanlin, which basically means knowing people and appointing them appropriately.
So knowing who to trust and putting the right people in the right positions sounds like solid advice for any leader.
Absolutely. And Wang Fuji suggests that if Huhai had really embraced this principle, if he had surrounded himself with wise and capable advisors, well, maybe things would have turned out differently.
But it seems like that wasn't the case. Was it the system itself that made it difficult for Huhai to find these trustworthy advisors?
You're hitting on a crucial point there. You see, the Qin Dynasty had this highly centralized system with the emperor holding absolute power. And while that might sound efficient, it also created an environment ripe for, shall we say, less than honest feedback.
Ah, so officials were probably more concerned with pleasing the emperor than with offering genuine advice.
Exactly. It becomes this vicious cycle, doesn't it? The emperor needs honest counsel, but those around him are afraid to speak their minds for fear of reprisals.
It's a recipe for disaster, really. But let's get back to Zhao Gao. What did he do when his concerns were seemingly ignored? Did he just shrug and say, well, okay then?
Not quite. Zhao Gao wasn't one to back down easily. He saw an opportunity in all this.
An opportunity? What kind of opportunity could there possibly be in a situation like this? It sounds like things were about to get even worse.
Remember, Huhai had expressed his desire for a life of pleasure, a life free from worries and responsibilities, and he had seemingly dismissed the potential threats that Zhao Gao had pointed out.
So Zhao Gao saw a way to manipulate the situation to his advantage, a chance to gain even more power and influence.
You're getting it. Zhao Gao understood that in this context, this system where everyone was trying to please the emperor, simply knowing people, as Confucius advised, wasn't enough.
So what did he do? Come up with some kind of master plan?
Exactly. He presented Huhai with a strategy that would address Huhai's anxieties about legitimacy and at the same time consolidate Zhao Gao's own position within the court.
Okay, spill the beans. What was this brilliant strategy?
Zhao Gao proposed a three-pronged approach. First, enforce the laws more strictly, create an atmosphere of, fear and control. Second, eliminate potential rivals.
Eliminate rivals? That sounds a bit drastic. Who exactly did he have in mind?
Well, he started with the princes, Huhai's brothers, of course, but he didn't stop there. He also targeted those ministers whose loyalty to Huhai was in doubt.
Whoa, that's pretty bold. I mean, wouldn't it have been wiser to try and build alliances, maybe try to win over at least one of those groups?
That's the conventional wisdom, right? Play one side against the other, build a power base. But Zhao Gao was a newcomer. He didn't have those deep-rooted connections to either the ministers or the imperial family. Any attempt to play that game could have easily backfired.
So he went for a more aggressive approach. All or nothing.
Exactly. High risk, high reward. And to understand how he pulled this off, we need to look at the bureaucratic system that Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor, had established.
The system based on those legalist principles. The idea that everyone could rise through the ranks based on merit.
Precisely. It was designed to promote efficiency and fairness. But Zhao Gao saw a way to exploit this system for his own ends. He realized that he could use the law itself, the very tool meant to maintain order, as a weapon against his enemies.
So the system meant to prevent tyranny became the instrument of tyranny. That's pretty ironic, isn't it?
Irony indeed. And it's a reminder that even the most well-intentioned systems can be twisted and manipulated by those in power.
So how did Zhao Gao actually go about implementing this plan? Did he just start rounding people up and throwing them in jail?
He was a bit more subtle than that. He had himself appointed as the chief judge, and he advised Huhai to revise the legal code, making the laws even harsher and more unforgiving.
Oh, I see. So now he's in charge of interpreting and enforcing the laws. He's basically turned the legal system into his own personal weapon.
Exactly. And the historical records paint a chilling picture of what happened next. Executions, dismemberment, confiscation of property. It was a reign of terror.
It's easy to get caught up in the political maneuvering and forget that there were real people, real lives impacted by these events.
Absolutely. And one of the most tragic stories is that of Prince Jiangle and his brothers.
What happened to them?
They were falsely accused of disloyalty and ultimately driven to suicide. The Ziji Qingjian even records Jiangle's defense, a powerful testament to the injustice he faced. He proclaimed his innocence, stating that he always followed the rules, served the empire faithfully.
But it wasn't enough to save him. A stark reminder of how easily power can be abused, especially when fear and suspicion are running rampant.
And this tragedy speaks to a larger theme in Chinese history, the tragic cycle of fratricide within imperial families. It's something that poets and historians have lamented for centuries. For example, in his poem Sing Lunan, Wu Yeye captures that sense of tragedy beautifully, highlighting the inherent dangers of unchecked power within families and dynasties.
So Zhao Gao had successfully eliminated his rivals within the imperial family. But his purge didn't end there, did it?
No, it didn't. Remember those grand tours that Huhai was so fond of? Well, Zhao Gao saw those as an opportunity too.
An opportunity to do what?
To extend his reach across the entire empire. He used those tours to target local officials, replacing them with people loyal to him and to the new regime.
So what was initially intended to be a showcase of imperial power became a tool for Zhao Gao to consolidate his control.
Precisely. It was a systematic dismantling of the old guard, a complete reshuffling of the power structure.
It's amazing how these seemingly insignificant events, a tour, a conversation, can have such far-reaching consequences, isn't it? It's like a domino effect.
It just goes to show that history is not just a linear progression of events. It's a complex tapestry woven from countless choices, actions, and reactions, each with its own ripple effect.
It makes you wonder, what if things had gone differently? What if Huhai had been a stronger, more discerning ruler? What if Zhao Gao had chosen a different path, one that didn't involve such ruthlessness and manipulation?
Those are the kinds of questions that keep historians up at night. And it's this element of what if that makes history so captivating, don't you think?
Absolutely. It's like we're trying to solve a giant puzzle, piecing together the past to understand the present. But while Zhao Gao might have achieved his immediate goal of, consolidating his power, did this victory come at a cost?
That's a great question, and it leads us to the heart of why this particular year, 209 BC, is so pivotal in the history of the Qin Dynasty. While Zhao Gao might have won the battle in the short term, his actions would ultimately have devastating consequences, setting in motion the very forces that would lead to the dynasty's downfall.
So last time we saw how Zhao Gao managed to consolidate his power, eliminating rivals and tightening his grip on the Qin dynasty. He seemed unstoppable. But as you mentioned, this victory came at a steep cost. What exactly were the long-term consequences of his actions?
You see, while Zhao Gao might have gotten rid of those immediate threats to Huhai's rule, his methods really backfired. He basically destabilized the foundations of the Qin dynasty. Think about it.
Okay, I'm thinking.
He purged all those experienced officials, replacing them with people who were only loyal to him, not necessarily competent.
Ah, I see. So he messed up that whole meritocratic system that Qin Shi Huang had put so much effort into building.
Exactly. That shift from valuing competence to just blind loyalty really did a number on the government. You can imagine the impact.
I'm imagining a whole lot of chaos and inefficiency.
You got it. A system where officials are more worried about pleasing their bosses than actually serving the empire effectively.
Sounds like a recipe for corruption and instability.
You hit the nail on the head. And remember those harsh laws that Zhao Gao put in place? The ones meant to keep everyone in line.
Yeah, those didn't exactly win him any popularity contests, did they?
Not at all. They alienated the common people. All that, combined with the constant fear of being purged or executed,
Created a whole lot of resentment. Makes sense.
exactly, and all that simmering discontent among the people, well, that eventually led to the very rebellion that Zhao Gao was so terrified of.
So in trying to save the dynasty, he actually ended up hastening its demise. The irony.
Ironic indeed. It's a classic example of how short-sighted solutions can have some pretty disastrous long-term consequences.
So even though there might not have been massive uprisings during this specific year, 209 BC, the stage was definitely set, right?
Oh, absolutely. The Zhuzi Qinyan and other historical records paint a pretty clear picture of how Zhao Gao's actions set the Qin dynasty on a path to collapse. It might not have been immediate, but the seeds of rebellion were definitely sown.
It's fascinating how this one year, 209 BC, really encapsulates the beginning of the end for the Qin dynasty. It's a story of ambition, power, manipulation, and those unintended consequences we talked about.
Right. It reminds us that history isn't just a bunch of random events. It's all interconnected. The choices people make, even those seemingly small decisions, they can have huge ripple effects.
Makes you think, huh? What if Huhai had been a different kind of leader? What if he'd listened to those early warnings from Zhao Gao and actually addressed those threats?
Or what if Zhao Gao had taken a different approach, maybe one that wasn't so focused on control and fear? Who knows how things might have played out?
That's what I love about history. There's so many what-ifs. It really gets you thinking.
Exactly. Those what-ifs force us to grapple with the complexities of human nature, the way power and ambition can corrupt, and the lessons we can learn from the past. It's all about exploring those complexities and trying to piece together this incredible puzzle we call history.
Well said. And for those listening who want to dive even deeper into this fascinating period, we encourage you to check out the biographies of key figures like Huhai and Zhao Gao, or explore the philosophies that shaped their world, like legalism. And don't forget those primary sources, like the enthronement edict we talked about. Those are like little time capsules, offering us a glimpse into the past.
They remind us that history is not just a collection of names and dates. It's about real people, real lives, and the choices they made that shaped the world we live in today.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the pivotal year of 209 BC in the Qin Dynasty, remember that even when faced with seemingly impossible odds, even when it feels like everything's falling apart, the choices we make can have a profound impact. History is shaped not just by grand events, but also by the countless individual decisions that lead up to them. Thanks for joining us.